They flattened my barn like it owed them child support. All I got was a pink slip and a smirk from a woman who once filed a noise complaint against Thunder. I didn't cry. I brewed coffee, studied my creek, and started thinking like a pipe wrench with a grudge. Let's just say, when you mess with a quiet neighbor who knows a thing or two about water pressure, don't expect your backyard paradise to stay crystal clear. Want to guess what happens when 29 pumps get involved? Drop your theories in the comments. Bonus points if you make me laugh. This one's for everyone who's ever been hoed into rage. Linda Beverly wasn't a woman, she was a human cease and desist letter with bangs, the kind who thinks wind chimes are a violation of moral code and who once banned inflatable Santas for being emotionally loud. She wore khakis like a threat and smiled like she had a backup HOA clause for breathing too enthusiastically, so when I stepped outside and saw my barn, my sanctuary, my workshop, the last standing piece of my wife's memory, turned into matchsticks, I didn't scream. I just stared at the wreckage while Linda's white SUV rolled up like the final boss of passive aggression. She stepped out wearing a lavender sweater set and said, "Ezra, this is what progress looks like. You ever hear a sentence that makes your molars itch? That was it. Progress apparently looks like ruin dressed in real simple magazine language." I didn't reply, I just watched her drive off, gravel crunching under her tires like she'd just signed a treaty with evil. But as I stood there in the silence, something else caught my ear. Water, a soft, steady trickle coming from the creek that ran through my property like an old friend. Curious, I followed that sound, my boots squelching through mud still bitter from demolition, and there it was, a narrow trench recently dug leading that seasonal creek right off my land, and straight into her resort project, Lake Bloomstone, she called it, a glorified pond dressed in marketing perfume. I'd seen the signs, the renderings, the social media posts. Modern tranquility, built from nature's best. But nature didn't volunteer. She hijacked it. That's when it clicked. I didn't just lose a barn, I inherited a water supply. You see, I didn't retire from irrigation because I was tired. I retired because I was dangerous when bored. 29 pumps sat in my shed, half of them still strong enough to move mud like gospel, and now I had motive, a map, and a woman with no clue that her precious lake was sipping from the wrong cup. I smiled. Not because I was angry, but because I suddenly had purpose. Real, muddy, gravity-fed purpose, real declare war on a quiet man with engineering experience and emotional damage. They took my barn and handed me a pink slip, but they also handed me a creek. And tomorrow, that water's getting a new itinerary. With turbulence. Stick around. It gets messy. Linda once fined a man for reckless hammock placement. So naturally my muddy creek gave her hives. The thing about being retired is people assume you've run out of fight. What they forget is retired just means your enemies now have your undivided attention. I stood over my pegboard with a Sharpie in one hand and a vengeance brewing in the other. That seasonal creek wasn't just water. It was leverage with flow rate. And Linda? She'd built her HOA palace on stolen plumbing. By noon, I was sorting pumps like a general, counting artillery. Some were old job leftovers, some salvaged from my cousin's barn sale, and one, an industrial beast named Big Bertha, I acquired at a swap meet in Elko where the seller accepted bourbon as legal tender. Every hose, coupling, and power cable had a purpose now. My workshop looked like a Home Depot aisle declared war. This wasn't just revenge. It was irrigation with a grudge. That's when Earl showed up, beer in hand and boots dirtier than ethics at an HOA meeting. "Heard the barn died. You planning a funeral or fireworks?" he asked. I handed him a blueprint. Earl squinted, then grinned. "You're pumping silt, not water." I nodded. "Correct. We're weaponizing turbidity." We spent that afternoon testing angles, plotting flow, and naming pumps like warships. By sunset, we had 29 fully operational units, each ready to stir Mother Nature. Linda, meanwhile, was still posting inspirational quotes over filtered photos of Lake Bloomstone. "Progress is the art of transformation," she wrote, beneath a picture of bulldozers flattening my barn. Bold of her to use the word art when she couldn't even spell hydrology. But let her post. Let her smile. Let her wear white to the grand opening. Because come Saturday, that lake was going to look like a smoothie made of shame and compost. I laid out the last section of hose and checked the flow disruption algorithm one more time. Everything was set. Pumps hidden, timers programmed, alibis plausible. Earl raised a toast with his thermos and said, "To chaos, naturally occurring." I smiled, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's wet, dirty, and powered by 220 volts. When life gives you runoff, make karma tea. They wanted a luxury lake. I'm about to give them a biology lesson. With sediment, and wait till you see what floats to the top. Don't drink, but I did raise a root beer toast the day my pumps started singing like Motown backup singers in a mudslide operation. Splashback kicked off at 6:00 a.m. sharp, right as Linda's HOA email hit inboxes titled, "Lake Bloomstone Countdown Begins." I sipped my coffee and tapped Activate All on my irrigation app. 30 pumps revved to life like a symphony of soggy justice. By 6:07, my property was hydrologically liberated, and her lake? That sucker was starting to marinate in silt like a bathtub steeped in compost tea. I'd done the math. With the slope, the velocity, and the volume of redirected creek water stirring up leaf litter and soil, Linda's man-made paradise was about to become a seasonal tribute to every muddy bootprint karma ever left behind. I strolled out to the back field and watched the magic. Water flowed like gossip at a church potluck. Quick, dirty, and hard to stop. A kid downstream was playing with a rubber duck. Poor thing floated back looking like it had been dipped in chocolate syrup and bad decisions. Meanwhile, Linda was live on Instagram. Her caption, "Final landscaping touches done, white outfit ready, Lake Bloomstone grand opening." She posed in front of the lake, with arms wide like she'd personally discovered water. I chuckled. That lake was already 30% mud, 20% leaves, and 50% poetic justice, and it was only getting richer by the hour. The filter system she'd installed wasn't designed to process satire. Around midday, Earl dropped by with sandwiches and binoculars. "Looks like a latte with twigs," he said, squinting at the lake. "Bless her heart." I laughed harder than I had in months. We sat on my porch like two grandpas watching the world's slowest roast unfold. Pumps whirred in the distance, like quiet applause from the gods of payback. I checked the weather. Sunny all day, perfect for photos. Terrible for hiding a swampy disaster. Then came the final nail. Linda posted a schedule of events. 2:00 p.m. ribbon cutting, 2:30 photo tour, 3:00 champagne toast. I stared at that post like it owed me money. That was my cue. That white outfit she bragged about, it was about to learn the color wheel the hard way. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just bubbles up from under the mulch. Her smile said, "Celebration." My pumps said dilution. Guess which one wins on camera? And honey, wait till the ribbon gets soggy. If lakes had Yelp reviews, hers was about to earn 1 star for texture. At precisely 1:57 p.m., Linda emerged like a swan with a superiority complex. White chiffon pearls and a smile so tight it looked stapled on. I was parked on my porch with Earl, a lawn chair, and a bowl of caramel popcorn we didn't deserve. The lake glistened like chocolate pudding, with twigs. Even the ducks had abandoned it. A group of HOA board members stood awkwardly by the folding chairs, pretending the water didn't smell like autumn regret. By 2:10, the first guest arrived in white capri pants and regrettable optimism. She leaned over the dock rail, squinted, and asked, "Is this a lake or compost soup?" 2 toddlers ran past her with floaties. One stepped in, then vanished knee-deep in muck. His mom screamed. The lake gurgled like it had secrets. I could almost hear Linda's blood pressure rising from across the pasture. Linda tried to pivot. "It's just a little organic movement," she chirped, her voice pitched like an airline safety video. She posed near the edge, waving toward the crowd. The wind picked up, flapping her dress like a surrender flag. And that's when she made the mistake. "See? It's perfectly safe." She stepped in like she was Moses parting the Red Sea. Instead, her designer heels hit a patch of muck so sticky it deserved its own zip code. She sank faster than her credibility. There was a collective gasp, then a silence so thick you could butter toast with it. And then laughter, honest echoing from the gut laughter. Phones came out. A guy in a golf polo muttered, "That's not a lake, that's a gravy boat." Earl was wheezing so hard I had to slap his back. Linda tried to pull her foot out, but her shoe stayed behind like a hostage. "This is an HOA-approved body of water. I'm very sorry." She yelled. Someone yelled back, "So was the Boston Harbor." She finally staggered back onto the bank, soaked from the knees down, in mud that looked like it had tax evasion. Her chiffon was ruined, her legacy drenched in irony. I raised my popcorn in salute. You can pave over decency with bylaws, but mud's a more honest storyteller. She built a lake for influence. But she just became an influencer for mud facials. And honey, the cameras were rolling. Linda's smile broke faster than a folding chair at a barbecue hosted by gravity. The sound of squishy fury came stomping up my gravel drive around 4:30 p.m. Linda looked like a half-drowned piñata, white chiffon dripping, heels gone AWOL, mascara melting like Dolly's clocks. She jabbed a mud-stained finger at me and screamed, "You'll regret this, Harvey Maddox!" The only thing missing was a thunderclap. Earl leaned on the porch rail like he was watching a fireworks show with extra potassium. I didn't flinch, just held up a laminated copy of the state's Waterway Protection Statute like a Jedi holding a lightsaber made of law. "Linda," I said, calm as a chilled beer in a sun hat, "do your contractors happen to have a permit for diverting seasonal creek flow?" Her mouth kept moving, but the words stopped forming like her brain hit the emergency brake. Her eyes went from rage to realization faster than a middle schooler caught Googling test answers. She blinked at the page, then again. Her lip curled. You think this proves something?" She snapped, but her volume had dropped 3 decibels and 2 shades of panic. "Linda," I said, pointing to the clause, "it's not me you need to explain it to, it's the folks who wear khaki vests and carry clipboards." She froze like someone just told her she'd been drinking decaf for years. Then she turned, muttering, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," like it was her new ringtone. Her legs moved, but her brain looked like it stayed behind to file a formal complaint. I watched her trudge back down the driveway, chiffon dragging like the last shred of pride on clearance. Earl whistled low and said, "That woman's about to learn what sediment and subpoenas have in common." 10 minutes later, she drove off in her SUV, windows down, towel-wrapped, Bluetooth on full volume, arguing with someone who probably charged hourly. And the best part? I hadn't touched her lake. I'd just let gravity and negligence dance the tango. Revenge is sweet, but legality is bulletproof and comes with footnotes. She stormed my door for revenge, left holding a legal pamphlet and wet socks. But guess who knocks next? County inspectors with questions and a clipboard. You know the HOA's in trouble when the county inspector starts taking selfies with your mud pit. The day the inspectors showed up, Linda tried to greet them like she was hosting a garden club brunch. "Welcome, we're so glad to have y'all out here. Just a little water issue," she chirped, standing next to a lake that looked like the world's saddest smoothie. But the inspectors? They weren't buying it. One of them, clipped board, vest and all, snapped a picture of the mess and muttered, "We're gonna need bigger boots." They didn't just stroll, they swarmed. 5 clipboards, 3 tablets, a guy with a drone. Turns out, Linda's visionary lake wasn't visionary at all. No permits, no drainage applications, no environmental assessments. It was basically a backyard prank with a price tag. When they asked who engineered the water diversion, Linda pointed at the contractor's name on a faded poster like it was a missing dog ad. The inspector nodded, wrote something down, and said, "This is going to be a long report." By the end of the week, the fines stacked up like bad Yelp reviews. County slapped her with violations for unauthorized creek manipulation, improper runoff management, and you guessed it, environmental disruption due to aesthetic landscaping. That last one made Earl laugh so hard he choked on a ginger snap. They drained Lake Bloomstone the following Monday. It didn't so much drain as burp out sadness and mosquito eggs. What was left behind looked like a crater made by guilt and poor judgment. Then came the petition. It showed up on doorsteps like a miracle of democracy. Motion to remove HOA President Linda Bradshaw. 92% of the neighborhood signed it, including her husband, who added a note, "I just want peace again." At the next HOA meeting, she didn't even show up. Her resignation letter was taped to the door next to a real estate flyer with "Motivated Seller" in bold. When you ignore rules long enough, they grow teeth. Bureaucratic ones. They drained her lake. She vanished from the HOA board. But her for sale sign? It was the cherry on top. And guess who bought the lot next door? Stay tuned. Let's just say the next swing hits harder. Literally. My new barn smells like sawdust, second chances, and sweet poetic justice. It started with a hammer and ended with half the town showing up with casseroles and cordless drills. Earl brought his nail gun. Mabel brought banana bread. Even the mailman parked his truck and asked, "Where's the lumber stack?" Apparently, revenge architecture is more popular than you'd think. The old barn had been my fortress. The new one? It was a movement. People who once clutched HOA flyers like gospel now hauled plywood like penitents. Turns out, when the HOA queen drowns in her own lake of lies, the townsfolk rediscover their moral compass, and it usually points toward a man holding a level and wearing overalls. We raised those walls in 2 weekends. Kids painted the fence. Teens used it as an excuse to skip algebra. One neighbor set up a coffee station labeled "Caffeine and Consequences." I didn't ask questions. Just drank the brew and kept swinging my hammer like every nail was a declaration of independence. On the final day, we hung the plaque. It wasn't fancy, just carved wood, sanded smooth with bold black letters. Built once, flattened once, rebuilt forever. I didn't cry, but I did stare at it long enough for Earl to say, "Blink twice if you're proud and trying not to sob like a Hallmark grandpa." Then came the part that broke me in the best way. Mr. Benner, 84 years old, Vietnam vet, cranky as burnt toast, shuffled up, looked around, tipped his cap and grumbled, "You brought the neighborhood back, son." That's when I knew. Linda may have taken my barn once, but she accidentally handed me the whole community. You can bulldoze a building, but you can't demolish decency. Not when it's nailed into every wall. Linda's gone, my barn's back, but wait till you hear what I did with the HOA's old shed. Spoiler, it involves goats and poetry. Turns out, a man and 29 pumps can do more for justice than most courtrooms. Linda didn't hold a garage sale. Didn't say goodbye, just slipped away like an unpaid HOA fee in the middle of the fiscal year. Her prized lakefront property sold faster than gossip at a church potluck, for less than what you'd pay for a zero-turn mower with cup holders. The sign in the yard didn't say sold, it whispered, surrender. Meanwhile, the barn became a symbol. Folks started calling it Harvey's Holdout. People brought pies, dogs ran free, and someone even hosted a ukulele night that ended in a spontaneous hoedown. It was like the neighborhood discovered what community meant the moment the HOA's air freshener scent of tyranny cleared out. Harvey never bragged. Didn't need to. The plaque on the barn said enough, and the muddy stain in Linda's history did the rest. Kids asked him about water pressure. Teens quoted him in their civics papers. One third grader wrote an essay titled, "Why Pumps Are More Powerful Than Principles." Harvey framed it and hung it next to the breaker panel. The kicker? He left one pump on. Just one, tucked back behind a cedar stump, running on solar, burbling at a peaceful trickle. Not for mischief, just for memory. A poetic little insurance policy. "In case someone forgets," he said, sipping lemonade. "Water remembers." Then came the county fair. The mayor handed Harvey a wooden plaque that read, preservation and backbone. He accepted it in a flannel shirt with paint on one sleeve and sawdust in his beard, said nothing, just nodded once and smiled, like a man who'd already won the argument before it started. His story isn't just about revenge, it's about roots, about what happens when you hold your ground literally and let decency do the talking, while pressure and gravity handle the rest. And maybe, just maybe, it's about how one barn can outlast 1,000 bylaws if it's built with purpose. So here's the truth. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to win clean. And sometimes, justice flows slow, but it always flows. Some men build barns, some build lakes, but only a few build reminders. Justice doesn't always come in a suit. Sometimes it wears boots, runs on gasoline, and burbles softly through 3/4-inch hose. If this one made you laugh, like it. If you've ever been HOA'd into madness, comment below with your wildest story and hit subscribe, because next week we tackle a committee that tried to outlaw porch swings. Yep, porch swings. Got your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. Let's laugh at the madness together. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story